The horn that opens the reeving is meant to sound like a death. I had heard it 11 times in my life, and I had sounded it 7, and every time it went up over the reeving wood the same way, long and low and final, a note that told every pack in the north that the wood was open now and that men would go into it who would not come out. My father had told me when I was a boy too small to run it, that the horn was made from the tusk of the first beast the first king had killed, and that its cry was the beast still screaming. I had believed him. I still half believed him. When I lifted it to my mouth that gray dawn on the ridge above Sundern and Blue, the note that came out of it was the note of something dying, and every wolf on the field below went still under it. Except I was not standing on the ridge that morning, where a king was meant to stand. I was down in the mud with the runners, in a plain wool hood the color of wet bark, with a borrowed name and a borrowed packmark stitched crooked on my shoulder. One more nameless man among the 100 nameless men the packs had brought to the edge of the wood to die or be counted. A steward I trusted stood on the ridge and sounded the horn in my place, and wore my cloak, and let the packs bow to an empty king, while the real one crouched in the wet grass and watched them think no one was watching. I had done it because I was tired of being lied to. A king sees the polished thing. He sees the champion the pack has fed and oiled and paraded. He sees the hall swept and the best cups brought out and the daughters put in their good gowns along the wall. He does not see the kennels. He does not see who is beaten and who is fed last and whose name is used for a curse. And the reeving, the ordeal hunt the 7 packs of the north had run every 7th year since before there were kings. The reeving was the one place a pack could not dress itself up, because the wood did not care what a man's cloak was worth. So I had put on wool the color of bark and gone down into it to see, with my own eyes and my own nose, what my packs were truly made of when they thought no crown was looking. I meant to see courage, I meant to see cruelty. I meant to come home, and know which of my alphas to trust with my northern border and which to quietly break. I did not mean to find her. The runners went in with the second horn, 100 men crossing the black tree line all at once, and the wood swallowing them, and the noise of it, the crashing and the shouting, and the first challenges thrown between rival packs before they were 10 steps under the branches. The reeving is not a race. There is no finish a man sprints to. It is 3 days in a wood that wants you dead, with a token to carry to the far cairn and back, and the only rule that has ever held is the oldest one. You may hunt the beasts, and you may hunt the course, but a wolf who hunts another wolf inside the reeving is cast out of the packs forever, his name struck, his blood no longer counted. It is the one law the North has never broken, because it is the one law that keeps the reeving a proving and not a slaughter. I went in slow at the flank where I could watch more than I ran. I let the fast men go ahead of me. I marked them, this one from Vaunt who trampled a slower man and did not look back, this one from the river packs who stopped, against all his own interest, to haul a stranger out of a bog and lost his lead doing it. I was already learning things a hall would never have told me. And then the wind turned, and I caught a scent that stopped me between one stride and the next. I cannot tell you even now what it was. I have tried. It was not perfume. There was nothing in it of a hall. It was cold water and crushed green and wood smoke gone faint, and under all of that something I had no word for, something that went past my nose and into the back of my skull and pulled, low and sure, the way a hook pulls. My wolf, who had been quiet and watchful all morning, came up all at once behind my ribs and turned its whole self toward that scent like a needle turning north. I had lived 31 years and worn a crown for 9 of them, and I had never in my life felt anything reach into me and take hold like that. I followed it before I chose to. That is the truth. My feet were moving before my head had agreed to anything. It led me off the runner's line, north and west, into the older part of the wood where the trees stand farther apart and the ground drops toward the gorge. And it led me, at the end of it, to a place I should not have been looking, and to a person no reeving in 300 years had ever had in it. She was crouched at the base of a split oak, very still, listening, not hiding the way a frightened thing hides, but the way a hunter goes still, weight low, head turned, reading the wood with more than her eyes. She was thin. Her dress was the wrong dress entirely for the reaving, not a runner's leathers but a work shift, gray, hemmed in dried mud to the knee, the dress of someone who spends her days on her knees in a kennel yard. Her hair was bound back hard out of her face. There was a trail knife in her hand, a real one, worn to the shape of her grip, and a coil of snare cord at her belt, and nothing else. No pack mark, no token pouch, no boots worth the name. They had sent a girl into the reaving with a kennel knife and no boots. I did not understand it yet, but I understood, looking at her, that whatever else this was, it was not a thing anyone had meant to survive. You do not equip a runner like that. You equip a thing you are throwing away. She heard me. Of course she heard me. I know now I could not have crept up on her if I'd tried for a year. She who could hear a hair change its mind 2 ridges off. She came around fast and low with the knife up between us, and I got my first look at her face, and my wolf, which had been straining toward her, went suddenly and completely quiet. Not still the way a struck thing is still. Quiet the way a house is quiet when the one you have been waiting for finally walks in and you can stop listening for the door. "I'm not your kill," she said. Her voice was low and even, no panic in it. She had the knife the right way and her feet the right way, and she had already, I could see, marked the ground behind her for where she'd go if I came on. A cornered thing that had decided not to be prey. "No," I said, "you're not." "Then walk on." She did not lower the knife. "There's men behind you moving fast. If you don't want to meet them, walk on." I should have. Everything I had come into that wood to do said walk on, count her, mark the pack that had spent her, and carry the account of it home. I did not walk on. I stood there in my bark-colored hood with the whole ordered plan of my morning coming apart in my chest, and I said the stupidest thing a hidden king has ever said. "Who put you in here?" Something moved across her face, surprise, that a runner would ask it, and then a hard, flat closing over of the surprise. "Same thing that puts anyone anywhere," she said. "Being no use to them alive." And then, because the wood was speaking and she was listening to it under our whole exchange, she said, sharper, "Down." I went down. I trusted it before I knew why I trusted it. A heartbeat later, 3 men of Vaunt came through the trees 40 paces east at a dead run, crashing, careless, and went by without ever seeing the 2 shapes gone flat behind the split oak. She had heard them in the ground before I'd heard them at all. When they were gone, she was already up and moving north, away from them, quick and quiet. And I, a king, who has commanded armies, who has never in his life followed another soul's back through a wood. I got up and went after her like a man walking in his sleep. I will tell you her name now, though I did not have it yet, Sorrel. In Sundern they called her the Mud Girl, and worse, and I will get to how I learned it. That morning I had no name for her at all. Only the pull in my chest and the wrongness of a kennel knife in a killing wood, and those 2 things together were enough to make me throw over 9 years of a king's good sense and follow a stranger into the deep part of the reaving. She stopped once at the top of a stony rise and looked back at me with open irritation. "Why are you following me?" "You know the wood," I said. It was true, and it was not the reason, and I think she heard both. "Everyone in the reaving thinks he knows the wood." She turned and went on, but she did not tell me again to walk on. That was the first thing she gave me, though neither of us would have called it that. She stopped telling me to go. I should tell you how she came to be there, because I made it my business after to learn every part of it, and because you cannot understand what her courage was worth unless you understand what it was up against. Sundern was one of my northern holds, a stone pack seat above the reaving wood, and its alpha in those years was a man named Osted. Osted the Hunt Master, they called him, and he loved the name more than he loved anything else, including his own honor. Sundern's pride was its reaving champions. It had produced 3 victors in a row, and Osted had built his whole standing on that, and the 7th year had come round again and he needed a 4th. He had won. A big raw-boned young wolf named Garrick, fast and mean, and fed like a prize bull for 2 years toward this exact 3 days. And 2 nights before the reaving, Garrick got drunk celebrating a victory he had not yet won, and fell down the kennel steps and broke his leg in 2 places. Now, a pack may run fewer than its full number in the reaving, but Ostad had boasted loudly before every rival alpha in the north that Sundern would field a full hand of runners this year, and to come up a man short after that boast was a shame he could not stomach. So the night before the horn in the yard, with Garrick white-faced on a plank and the count coming up 1 short, Ostad looked around for a body. Any body. A thing that could cross the tree line at the second horn, so that the tally keepers would write Sundern's full number, and that could then quietly die in the wood where no one would ever have to account for it. His eye fell on the girl who slept in the kennel with the hounds. She had been born in Sundern to a pathfinder, a trail reader of the old line, the ones the packs had used generations back to find their way and their game and their lost children in country like this, before the packs got proud and decided that reading the ground was drudge work fit for servants. Her father had been the last of them there, and he had died when she was small, and with no one to speak for her, she had gone down and down in the pack until she was the mud girl, the one who mucked the kennels and reared the hounds and slept warm against them because there was nowhere warmer for her to sleep. They had let her keep her father's trail knife because no one else wanted it. They did not know, none of them had ever once thought to wonder, that the drudge in the kennel yard could read that would better than any oiled champion Sundern had ever sent into it. So when Ostad needed a body to throw away, he threw away the one he thought was worth the least. He came into the kennel yard and told her she would run the reaving, and when she stood there and did not answer he thought it was fear, and he laughed, and he said she told me this herself, much later, in a plain voice with no self-pity in it at all. He said, "Cross the line so the count's right, and then do us the one useful thing you've ever done, and don't come out." He gave her nothing. No leathers, no boots, no token pouch, no water. He gave her a place in the tally and a wish for her death, and at the second horn 2 of his men walked her to the tree line to be sure she went in. And she went in. She could have bolted, I suppose. She could have gone over the tree line and then sat down under the first tree and wept, and I would not have blamed her, and no one would ever have known. Instead, she went into the deep wood at a hunter's lope with a kennel knife and a coil of cord, because she told me this too because it was mine. The wood, her father's wood, the one place in the whole of Sundern where the mud girl was not the least of anyone. If I was going to die somewhere, she said, I'd rather die somewhere I could read. That is the woman Ostad spent to make his tally look full. I want you to hold that in your mind, the yard, the broken champion, the laugh. Don't come out, because in a little while I am going to be lying under a fallen tree with my life running out of my leg into the leaf mold, and the only soul in all that wood who stops for me is going to be her. We ran together, after a fashion, the rest of that first day. She never once acknowledged that we were running together. She simply stopped leaving me behind, and I simply kept up, and the wood kept trying to kill both of us, and she kept reading it before it could. I learned more about her in that one day, watching, than I have ever learned about anyone in a hall in a year. She read the ground the way I read a man's face. She knew where the earth was wrought over the old workings before we came to it. She knew, from a change in the birdsong I could not even hear, that a runner was coming a long time before he crossed our line. She knew the sound the gorge made when the wind came up off it, and steered us wide of the crumbling edge in the dark without ever seeming to think about it. Twice she saved my life and never named it a saving. Once I put my weight on a lip of stone above the water, and it was only her hand closing hard on the back of my hood and hauling that kept me out of the gorge. And when I turned to thank her, she was already 3 steps on, watching the trees, as though a king dangling over a drop was simply one more thing the wood did that had to be managed. I stopped at dusk and said, "You've done this before." "No," she said, No one's ever been fool enough to put me in it before. She said it without bitterness, which was somehow worse than bitterness. But I've walked this wood since I could walk. My father read it, I read it. It's the only thing I have that they didn't take because they never wanted it. She looked at me then, really looked in the failing light, and I felt the pull go through me again, so strong I nearly told her everything on the spot. Why do you care where I've been? I could not tell her I am the alpha king of all these packs, and I came into this wood in a beggar's hood to catch my own alphas lying. And you are the truest thing I have found in it, and my wolf has decided you are ours. So I told her a piece of the truth instead. Because someone put you in here to die, I said, and it makes me angry, and I don't get angry easily. She was quiet a moment, then, you talk like a man used to being obeyed. She said it as an observation, not an accusation, turning it over. Odd, in a runner with a crooked mark and no boots worth stealing. I realized, been standing like a king, and speaking like a king all day without once thinking to hide it. So sure had I been that no one down in the mud would ever read a king off a man's spine. She had read it in an afternoon. She did not know what she'd read. She had no reason on earth to imagine the king himself was crouched in the reeving in bark-colored wool. But she'd read that I was more than my hood said, the same way she read everything else, and filed it, and watched me a little more carefully after and said nothing. That was the second thing she gave me, though again neither of us named it. She saw more of me than anyone in 9 years, and she did not use it. She simply set it down between us and kept walking. We made a cold camp that first night in the lee of a great fallen trunk. No fire. A fire in the reeving is a flag that says here we are to every rival pack in the wood. And she showed me, without a word, how to bank leaves for warmth and how to sit so the cold ground didn't pull the heat out of me. And she took the first watch, though I told her I would. And I woke twice in the dark to find her sitting exactly as she'd sat, awake, reading the black wood with her ears. Keeping watch over a stranger she owed nothing. I lay there under the stars with the pull in my chest gone quiet and warm the way a held hand is quiet, and I thought, whatever else I do in this wood, I am not leaving her in it. I who had come to count my packs and go home. I had a crown and an army and a plan, and all of it had reorganized itself in a single day around a mud-hemmed girl with her father's knife, and I was not troubled by that at all. That is how the bond takes you, not like a fever, like a fact you find you have always known and are only now being told. The second day the wood turned killing in earnest, and it did not do it with beasts. I had expected beasts. Everyone who has ever heard of the reeving expects the beasts, the great gray boars, the woodcats, the things that come down out of the high wood when the horn wakes them. And there were beasts. We crossed the sign of them all that second morning, and once, at a distance, we watched a woodcat the size of a pony pace a ridgeline and lose interest in us because sorrel had already turned us downwind of it before it ever knew we were there. But it was not the beasts that made the second day a slaughter. It was the men. By the second day, the fast packs had reached the far cairn and were carrying their tokens back. And by the second day, the rivalries that a hall keeps polite had shed their politeness out where no crown was looking. I had come into the wood to see what my alphas were made of, and the second day showed me, and I did not like what it showed. The old law, no wolf hunts another wolf in the reeving, held mostly, in the sense that no one drew a blade on another runner outright. But there are 100 ways to spend a rival short of a blade. A good crossing left fouled behind you, so the man on your heels goes into the bog you just skirted. A shout in the wrong place that brings a woodcat down on the pack behind. A rope bridge over the gorge cut half through so it holds your weight and not the next man's. I saw all 3 that second day. I marked everyone and the packs that did them, and I promise you those accounts were paid in full when I came home. But that is another story, and it is not the one that matters. The one that matters is this. Sometime past midday, the 2 of us moving north and west along the high shoulder of the gorge, we were seen. 3 runners of Vaunt, the same pack whose men had trampled the slough and fouled the crossings all morning, came up on our line from the south, and they were fast, and they had the look of men who had decided that the surest way to carry a token home was to make sure fewer other people carried one. They did not, I think, know or care who we were. We were simply two shapes ahead of them on a good line along the gorge, and if two shapes went into the gorge, that was two fewer shapes at the far cairn. Sorrel heard them long before I did. She always did. But the ground along the gorge shoulder is bad ground, narrow, stony, the drop on one hand and the tangled deadfall of an old blowdown on the other, whole-grown trees thrown down across each other by some storm years gone, a great gray lattice of trunks and torn root plates twice a man's height. There was nowhere to go wide. There was only forward along the narrowing shoulder, or into the deadfall. Into the trees, she said. The blowdown, they won't follow into that, it's a leg breaker. She was right, as she was always right. 3 men who mean to shove you off a cliff do not chase you into a maze of fallen trunks where every step can snap an ankle. We went into the blowdown, over and under and along the great tilted trunks, and she read even that killing lattice like a page there. Put your foot there, that one sound. Not that one, it's rotten under the bark. Duck here, and the vaunt men pulled up at the edge of it, shouted something ugly after us and went on along the easy shoulder to find easier prey. It should have been the end of it. She had gotten us out clean, the way she got us out of everything. And then I did the one thing in that whole wood that she could not read ahead of, because it was my own stupidity and not the wood's. I was watching them go, the 3 men, up along the shoulder instead of watching my feet. A king's habit that, watch the men. I put my weight on a great gray trunk she had not yet cleared, one I had not been told was sound, and it was not sound. It had been holding up half the lattice on a rotten heart, and it went, and the whole tangle above it shifted and came down, and I went down under it. I do not remember the fall. I remember the world turning to gray wood and thunder, and then I remember lying on my back in the leaf mold at the bottom of it with the daylight coming down through a cage of trunks above me, and I remember that I could not move my leg, because a limb as thick as my body had come across it and pinned it to the ground, and the pain was a white thing that took the wood away in waves. And I remember the blood, I could feel it. A jag of the broken limb had opened my thigh along the outside, a long deep tear, and the blood was coming out of it in a way I had seen enough wounds to know the meaning of. It was coming out fast. It was the kind of bleeding a man does not walk away from if it is not stopped, and stopped soon, and I was pinned under a tree in the deep reeving wood 2 days from any friend who knew my face, and my steward on the ridge thought I was safe, and the only living soul who knew where I was a mud-hemmed girl I had known for 1 day who owed me exactly nothing. I want to be honest about what I thought lying there. I did not think she will save me. I had spent my whole life among wolves who calculate, and every calculation said she would go on. She owed me nothing. I was a stranger who had followed her and slowed her and gotten himself pinned through his own fool fault. Every runner in that wood who had left a rival in a bog that day had done the sum I was doing now and come out the same way. Go on and live. I thought, with a strange far-off calm, the blood taking the panic with it, she'll go on, and she'll be right too. Then her face came into the cage of gray wood above me, and she looked down at me pinned and bleeding in the wreck, and I watched her do the sum. I watched it because she let me. She was not a woman who hid her face. I saw her taking the tree across my leg, and the blood and the light already going long, and the 2 days of killing wood still between her and the tree line. And I saw her understand, she who read everything, exactly what stopping here would cost her. To free me and bind that wound and haul a grown man out of a deadfall would eat what was left of the day and half her strength, in a wood that was hunting both of us, and it might well kill her, and it would gain her nothing, because I was nobody. A crooked mark and no boots, she saw the whole sum, she did not look away from it. And then she came down into the wreck to me anyway. Don't, I said. It came out of me before I could stop it, the last honest thing I had, I think, the plain truth of a man who has spent his life being served and has never once in that life had someone reckon the cost of him and choose him despite it. Don't. You'll die doing it. Go on. I'm not worth the day. She was already down on her knees in the blood-wet mold beside me, already tearing a long strip off the hem of that gray work shift with 2 hard pulls, already reaching to get her fingers into the tear in my thigh to find the vessel that was killing me. She did not stop. She looked at me, one flat, level look, close, our faces a hand apart in the gray light, and she said the thing I have carried every day of my life since. I don't leave anything in this wood that's still breathing, she said. I never have. That's the only thing that's ever been mine to decide, and I'm not giving it to the likes of you to decide for me. So be quiet and let me work. And she put her hands into the wound. I have been marked by kings and blessed by loremasters. I have stood on the oath stone of my line and felt the whole weight of 9 generations settle on me. None of it, was what it was to feel her hands close down over the tear in my leg, hard and sure and not gentle at all, pressing the life back into me with the whole of her strength, while she wrapped the strip of her own dress above it and hauled it tight enough to make me cry out. The pull that had lived in my chest since the first day, the low sure hook of the bond, went through me in that instant so hard and so complete that it took the pain and the blood and the gray wood and folded them all into one single fact, and the fact was her. Her hands. The mud on her knuckles and the blood to her wrists and the flat fierce set of her mouth as she worked to keep a nobody alive. My wolf did not rise or howl or go still. My wolf simply lay down inside me, all its long restless watchfulness gone quiet at once, the way a hunting thing goes quiet when it has finally come home to the one den it was looking for. There, something in me said, wordless, certain, older than my crown, there she is. That's the one. That's ours. She did not feel it. That is the part I have never gotten over. It struck me like the horn of the first beast, and she felt nothing but a stranger's leg under her hands, and a wound she meant to beat. She had no bond to warn her, no wolf to name me. She saved my life for no reason at all except that she does not leave breathing things in the wood, and that plain, unmagical decency was worth more than every destined thing that has ever been laid on me. She got the bleeding stopped. It took her a long time and it cost her, and she never once wavered. Then she set her shoulder under the great gray limb across my leg, and used a shorter trunk for a lever the way her father must have taught her, patient, reading the balance of the whole lattice, so that shifting the one limb would not bring the rest down on us both, and she lifted it enough, grunting, shaking, her whole thin frame a single drawn line of effort, for me to drag the pinned leg free. Then she got me up. A grown man, a head and a half taller than her, gone weak with blood loss, and she got me up out of that wreck with my arm over her shoulders and her arm hard around my back, one slow, terrible step at a time, out of the killing lattice and up onto sound ground, into the lee of a standing rock where the light couldn't find us. And there, finally, with the 2 of us down in the leaves and both of us shaking, she looked at the mess of my leg and the strip of her own dress soaked dark, and she said, in a voice gone rough with the effort, the first thing that told me she was afraid not for herself. She had never once been afraid for herself. You're going to slow us to nothing now. You know that. I've likely killed us both, stopping. Then why did you? I said. She was quiet. She looked out at the wood going dark, and she said very low, because no one stopped for my father. He went into this wood hurt the last time, and the pack he'd served all his life ran on and left him in it, and I was too small to go find him, and by the time I could he was 3 days cold under the deadfall and the wood had him. She was not weeping. Her voice was flat and old. I was 6. I have hated every runner that ever left a hurt thing in this wood since I was 6 years old. I was not going to become one of them to save myself a hard night. That's all. It isn't kindness. It's just the one thing I won't be. I lay there against the cold rock with her father's whole death and her whole life laid open in 4 sentences, and the bond singing so loud in me I could barely think over it. And I understood that I was not going to be able to keep my secret much longer, and that when it came out, I was going to have to be worthy of the woman who had put her hands in my blood for no reward, and I was not at all sure that a king, any king, was worthy of that. We did not run the third day. We could not. I could barely stand. She built a camp instead, a real one, hidden, tucked under the standing rock and roofed with deadfall so cleverly laid that it read from 10 paces as nothing but more wreck. And she nursed me through the night and into the third dawn with the patience of a woman who has spent her whole life keeping wounded things alive because no one would keep her. She packed the wound with a paste of chewed leaves I did not know the name of, and she did. She kept me warm with her own back against mine in the cold. She hunted a hare with her snare cord and a hard cast of her knife, and fed me the whole of it and ate almost nothing herself. And when I fought her on that, she looked at me with such tired scorn that I gave up and ate. She did all of it without once complaining, and without once mentioning again the thing we both knew, that in stopping for me she had thrown away her own slim chance at the far cairn, and with it any hope of coming out of the reaving as anything but the mud girl who had been sent in to die and had, in the tally-keeper's eyes, obligingly done so. She had saved a nobody at the cost of her own life's one chance to be counted as somebody, and she never once held it against me. Somewhere in that long third night, with the fire we still did not dare light gone imaginary in the dark and both of us past pretending we were strangers, she asked me my name. I had lied about it once already, at the tree line, given a borrowed one. Lying under her care in the dark, warm with the hair she'd fed me and the bond gone quiet and deep, I found I could not do it twice. Rurik, I said, my own name, the king's name. I gave it to her the way you'd hand someone a live coal, carefully watching to see if she'd know it. She did not know it. Why would she? The mud girl of Sundern had never been to a hall, never seen a coin stamped with a face, never stood in a crowd while a king rode by. The name landed on her as just a name. Rurik, she said, trying the shape of it. That's a hard old name for a man with a crooked mark and no boots. A pause. Then quieter, with the first thing in her voice that had ever sounded like it might one day be warmth. I'm sorrow. I know, I said before I could think. She went still. How do you know that? I never told you. And I could not tell her because I have made it my business in 1 day and 2 nights to learn everything the wood will tell me about you, because that was true but not the whole truth, and the whole truth was still hiding behind a borrowed hood. So I said, the Vaunt men, on the first day, I heard one of them say it. A lie. A small one. The last one I ever told her. She let it go. But something in her had heard the I know under the excuse, heard that a stranger in a wood had wanted her name badly enough to keep it. And she was quiet for a long while after. And when she took the last watch, she sat a little closer to me than the cold strictly required. And I lay awake behind her in the dark with my whole reordered life aching in my chest, and I made her a vow she could not hear. You saved a nobody, I told her, silent, watching the set of her thin shoulders against the last of the stars. You will not be sorry you did, whatever it costs me, whatever I have to unmake in my own kingdom to do it. The woman who does not leave breathing things in the wood is not going to be left in it either. Not by me. Not ever. On the third dawn, the far horn sounded, the recall, the note that says the reaving is closing, and every runner still breathing must come out of the wood to the muster field, or be counted lost in it. Sorrow got me up. I could walk barely, leaning on a staff she'd cut and on her, and we began the long, slow climb back toward the tree line and the light and the hole waiting north. She did not know she was walking a king out of the wood. She thought she was hauling one more hurt nobody to safety because she does not leave hurt things behind, and that when she came out of the tree line she would step back into being the mud girl of Sundern, the drudge Osted had thrown away, with nothing to show for 3 days of hell but a stranger's life she'd saved for no reward. She had no idea that the whole North was about to see exactly what she was. Neither quite did they. The tree line coming out is nothing like the tree line going in. Going in, the runners cross it alone, into the dark, unwatched. Coming out, they cross it into the hole waiting north. The muster field below Sundern was full when Sorrow walked me out of the wood on the third morning. Every one of the 7 packs drawn up in their colors, the tally keepers at their long tables, the alphas on the rise above, and the king's own standard flying over the ridge where my steward still stood in my cloak. Because as far as all the north knew, the king had watched this reaving from that ridge for 3 days and never once come down. I felt sorrow falter as we came out into the light and the noise and all those eyes. Not from fear. I had learned by then she did not falter from fear. She faltered because she was the mud girl of Sundern, and she had spent her whole life being unseen. And here was the entire north with its eyes on the tree line, and she was walking out of it in a ruined dress with a bleeding stranger on her arm, and every instinct 3 days of survival had not yet burned out of her said, get to the edge, get small, get gone before they notice you. Steady, I said, don't let go of me. She gave me a look, half exasperation, half the thing that was becoming against all her will trust. You can barely stand. I've no plans to let go of you. Then the field saw us, and the first thing that happened was that Ostad saw her. I felt it go through him from 40 paces, the hunt master of Sundern, up on the rise in his good cloak among the alphas, looking down at the tree line for his runners, and seeing, walking out of it alive, the girl he had sent in to die. His face did a thing I have seen guilty men's faces do exactly once each, and never forget. It went white, and then it went furious, because the shame he had buried in the wood 2 mornings ago had just walked back out into the daylight in front of every alpha in the north, and a man like Ostad does not feel his own guilt. He only feels the danger of being seen. He came down off the rise fast. You, he said to her loud, playing it for the field, laughing the way he'd laughed in the kennel yard, still crawling. I sent you in to make the count, girl, not to come out, and you've dragged some half-dead beggar out with you. Sundern's mud, cleaning up the woods leavings to the last. A few of his men laughed with him because they always laughed with him. He reached to take her by the arm to haul her aside out of the light back into being nothing. Get off the field. You've shamed us enough for one. Take your hand off her. I said it quietly, but I said it in the voice I had not used in 3 days, my own voice, the one that does not ask, and I straightened up off her shoulder as I said it, and I put back the bark-colored hood, and I let the whole muster field see the face under it. I watched it move across the field like wind across grass. The tally keepers first, who had seen my face on the coin they weighed with, then the alphas on the rise. Then my steward on the ridge, going gray, and then the standard-bearer, and then a horn, my own horn, going up in a note that was not the reaving's death cry but the other one, the one that means the king is here, the king in the flesh, and every wolf on that field going down onto one knee like a wave running out from where I stood, until the only 3 people left on their feet on the whole muster field were me, and a frozen white-faced Ostad with his hand still half raised, and Sorrel, who was staring at me with the whole world coming apart behind her eyes. Rurik, she said, just my name, the name I'd handed her like a coal in the dark. She was looking at the kneeling north and the king's horn and the standard, and she was doing the last sum, the one that finished all the others, the crooked mark. No boots, talks like a man used to being obeyed, wanted my name badly enough to keep it. Rurik. I watched her arrive at it. I watched her understand that the half-dead beggar she had put her bare hands into the blood for, at the cost of her own one chance, for no reward, was the alpha king of every pack on that field. You lied to me, she said. Lo, just for me. There was no fear in it. There was something worse for a moment, the flat closing over I'd seen on the first day, the look of a woman bracing to be made a fool of, because in her whole life every time the powerful had noticed her it had cost her. Once I said, about my name in the dark, and I've regretted it since I said it, not about anything else, not about you. I stepped closer, my leg would barely hold me, but I would have crawled it. Everything I told you under that rock was true, Sorrel, every word. I came into the wood in a beggar's hood to see what my packs were truly made of when they thought no crown was watching. I raised my voice then and turned it out across the kneeling field, because what came next she needed the whole north to hear, and so did they. And I have my answer. I turned to Ostad. Hunt Master of Sundern. He flinched at his own title. 3 mornings ago, in your kennel yard, you needed a body to fill a boast. Your champion had drunk himself down a flight of steps, and you were a man short of the full hand you'd bragged of. And rather than take the small shame of running short and honest, you took a larger one. You put a girl with a kennel knife and no boots into the deadliest 3 days in the north, in a place in the tally, and you told her. I did not look away from him, and I gave the field his own words, which she had given me under the rock. You told her to make the count right, and then do the one useful thing she'd ever done and not come out. The field made a sound, a low sound. The other alphas, who had knelt to their king, now turned their heads to look at Osted, and it is one thing to spend a drudge in the dark of a wood, and quite another to have your king name the deed out loud to every rival you have ever boasted in front of. Was born to Pathfinder, I said. The last true trail reader your hold ever had a line your pack decided in its pride was drudge work, and buried in a kennel. Her father died hurt in that same wood because the pack he'd served all his life ran on and left him in it. You looked at his daughter, and you saw the least thing in Sundern to throw away. I let that sit. I have just spent 3 days in the reaving wood being kept alive by the least thing in Sundern. She read that wood like scripture. She pulled me out of a deadfall that would have been my grave. She put her hands into a stranger's blood and stopped it with a strip of her own dress, when every calculation a wolf could make said walk on and live. And when I told her to leave me, that I wasn't worth the day, she told me she does not leave breathing things in that wood and never has and would not start with me. I looked at the kneeling packs. That is what your hold threw away. That is the least of Sundern. I would that the greatest of any pack I have were half of it. Osted had no words. There were none for him to have. You will not run another reaving, I told him. You will not hold Sundern's seat past this season. What becomes of you after, I'll decide when I'm less inclined to be generous than I am with her hand still warm from saving my life. Now kneel to your king like the rest, and be grateful I let you do it standing this long. He knelt. The whole north was kneeling, and I turned back to the one person on that field who was not, because I had not asked it of her and never would, and I found her still staring at me, still braced, still half certain that all of this was just one more way the powerful were about to make the mud girl into a spectacle before they set her down again. So I did the only thing that could tell her otherwise. I knelt. A king, on his one good knee, in the mud of the muster field, in front of every pack in the north, to a girl in a ruined dress with no boots. The field's low sound became no sound at all, and I took her hand, the one that still had my blood dried in the creases of the knuckles, and I held it, and I said it so the north would carry it to every hall for 100 years. I have a bond in me that named you the moment I caught your scent in that wood, and I have been carrying it for 3 days like a coal I was afraid to open my hand and show you. I'll not use it to take anything from you. You've had enough taken. The bond is mine to feel. The choosing is yours to make, freely or not at all. And if you send me off this field I will go, and Sundern will still answer to you and not to Osted, and you will never be the least of anywhere again whatever you decide about me. I tightened my hand on hers just once, but I am asking. Not the king, the half-dead fool you wouldn't leave in the wood. Come out of the mud, Sorrel. Not because I'm offering you a crown, because I would rather read the rest of my life beside the one soul in the north who does not leave breathing things behind than reign another day without her. Choose it, or don't, but it's yours to choose. It's the one thing that's ever going to be mine to give you, and I'm giving it to you free. She looked down at me for a long time. The whole north held its breath. And the mud girl of Sundern, who had never in her life been given a choice that was truly hers, who had been spent and thrown away and told not to come out. She looked at the kneeling king with her father's death and her whole hard life behind her eyes, and she did the last thing none of them expected, least of all the men who'd called her nothing. She laughed once, rough and disbelieving, and under it warm. "You great fool," she said. "You knelt in the mud. Now you'll never get up with that leg, and I'll have to haul you out of this too." She closed her hand around mine hard, the way she'd closed it on my wound. I don't leave breathing things behind. I told you that. And then lower, only for me, the bracing finally gone out of her face and something new and unguarded coming up behind it. I chose you under the rock, Rurik, when I still thought you were nobody. Knowing you're a king doesn't change it. It only makes it more of a nuisance. I got up. She hauled me up, of course. I could not have done it without her. And I think we both knew that was going to be the shape of the rest of it, and neither of us minded. The north rose with us. And somewhere at the edge of the field, a broken-legged young champion named Garrick, propped on a plank, was watching the girl he'd never once looked at in the kennel yard stand hand in hand with the king, and I hope he carried that sight the rest of his life. But she would not have a great wedding. She said the North had stared at her enough for one lifetime, and she was not going to stand up in front of it again in a gown to be gawped at, and I found I agreed, and we were bound quietly in the old way, under the trees at the edge of the reaving wood. Her father's wood, the one place she had ever been more than the least of anyone, with only a loremaster and the moon and a ring of real wolves who had come down out of the dark to sit at the tree line and watch, the way wolves do, when something true is happening. She made a strange Luna. She would not stay out of the kennels. She could not be kept from the wood. Half my court did not know what to do with a queen who read the ground better than the huntsman and slept better on watch than in a bed, and I let them not know what to do with her, because I had learned the price of a hall that dresses everything up, and I wanted, for the rest of my reign, one person near me who could not be lied to and would not lie. She reorganized my whole northern border in a season by the simple method of walking it and reading it, and telling me the truth about who could be trusted. And she was right every time, the way she was right in the wood, and the packs that had spent their drudges learned to fear the Luna who had once been won. I built no monument to the reaving where I nearly died. She would not have it. But I did one thing, and it is the thing I want to end on, because it is hers and not mine. There is a law in the North now. It is a small law and a plain one, and she wrote it, not I, though it goes out under the king's seal. It says that no wolf of any pack of mine may leave a hurt runner in the reaving wood, that to run on past a breathing thing and save yourself the hard night is from now on the one shame that costs a wolf his place in the packs, the way hunting another runner always has. The tally keepers grumbled that it slows the hunt. It does. She does not care. She stood on the muster field the first year the law was read aloud, and I watched her face while they read it, and she was not looking at the king or the alphas or the crowd. She was looking at the tree line, at the dark under the trees, where a man had died hurt and alone a long time ago because no one stopped. There, she said low only to me when the reading was done, just the one word, and then she took my hand, her fingers still always a little rough, a little marked, and we turned and walked back up toward the hall together, the mud girl and the king, out of the mud for good, and neither of us ever left a breathing thing in that wood again.